We calling this the takeoff because it is indeed in our minds a takeoff. Never mind the fact that people are working with this being an interim budget. Hello and welcome to this special conversation with me, Niraj, and my colleague Tamanna Inamdar. We are trying to piece this together into two halves, which is try and talk about how fixed income markets will approach whatever decisions are taken in the budget, and then how will the equity markets take off as well? And two very special guests, Tamanna, coming in on this.
Absolutely. This has been sort of, I would say, seen as a vote on account, not a very high impact budget, but that would be perhaps foolhardy for a couple of reasons. Look at 2019, where you had a vote on account which read pretty much like a full budget, and lo and behold, when the NDA came into power for the second time round a couple of months later and presented its first post-election budget in July, it was pretty much the same budget with a few additions and tinkering there. You've already seen ahead of the budget an announcement on import duty cuts on mobile components. So the budget will now become an opportunity to lay down a statement vision. One of the important factors, though, will this government stick to its path of fiscal consolidation? And here's where we bring in our Sivakumar of Axis Mutual Fund. First up on the show, Shiva, great to speak with you. Thank you for joining us this morning on NDTV Profit. And let's begin with that base question. I would say that not just this government, but governments over the world had a free pass of sorts for the last couple of years. You were recovering post-COVID. Fiscal deficit wasn't such a big, fat red line that you had to adhere to. That has changed now, right? This is the budget where you look very closely at the numbers and see if we are truly on the way to a trajectory of a 4.6% fiscal deficit by FY26. Would you agree with that?
Yep. Good morning, first of all. Yes. Short answer. The long answer is that, yeah, we need to. The context matters a lot in these kind of discussions. So you're absolutely right. Post-COVID, there was a significant relaxation of fiscal policies across the world as governments tried to support their respective economies. And over the last few years, obviously, that need to support the economy has decreased. But more importantly, the need to rein in the fiscal to contain inflation has, I think, also mattered a lot. In many countries, we've seen inflation remaining unsustainably high, and one contributor to that has been the high fiscal deficit. So I think both from a macroeconomic perspective on inflation as well as from a growth support, we would think that there is a need to consolidate the budget.
Just a quick question, Siva. On the morning of 1st Feb, are you going to be more keen on what Jerome Powell is saying or what Nirmala Sitharaman is saying?
Both are going to be extremely important. I think if you look at the budget, and especially from a macro perspective, the single number which matters is the fiscal deficit. And there's broad agreement that the government will follow the path towards consolidation. So unless there is this extraordinary surprise that the government throws at us in terms of changing the trajectory of the fiscal policy, from a fixed income rates markets perspective, this budget should be relatively non-event. I think yes, it's possible that some small policy changes could be announced, which makes some kind of an impact. The Fed's decision and then the RBI next week, I think they're going to be even more important from setting the tone of rates for us over the next year. So I think we will be paying a lot of attention to the Fed in as much as to the budget.
Siva, good morning, Niraj here. Would a number which is northwards of 5.5% for FY25 disappoint you, or would you take it in your stride?
I think if it's above 5.5, it will certainly be a disappointment. I think the government has been talking about sticking to this trajectory that they want to bring the deficit down to 4.5% by FY26, which would still be significantly higher than the pre-COVID trajectory. So, to bring fiscal deficit onto a sustainable path, we need to see some significant consolidation. Now, 5.3, 5.4, I think somewhere there is where the market will be happy with. And I think that will largely be achieved even if they maintain the nominal fiscal deficit at the same number, simply because, the GDP expands by about 10%. So if you keep it at the same number, then 5.9, 5.6, 5.9 to 6 would become closer to 5.3, 5.4 next year. So I think that's the expectation that we are all going.
Siva, the other aspect is the borrowing number, and the belief is that currently the market is working with a number of about 15.2 trillion for FY25. Now, my question is, if the number is lower than that, and will be, of course, the whole math will be important, but if the number is lower than that and other things remaining constant, would this be positive for bond markets, or do you think that is kind of baked in?
I think the exact number depends on two items, right? One is how much the net market borrowing is and how much is refinancing, which is repayments of maturities. Now, repayment maturities can happen in two ways. I mean, one is that if, for example, if the government decides to do some kind of additional switches before the end of this financial year, then the next financial year supply goes down. So you have to look at it from the perspective that if they have other ways of managing the gross market borrowing number from 1 year to the next. So we will wait and see what is the actual fiscal deficit and what will be therefore the market borrowing, how much of it is on account of switches, etc. before I can comment on that. I think if you're right that the market is basically working with a 14-15 lakh crore kind of borrowing program. And if this sticks in that ballpark, I think it will be acceptable.
You know, it's a unenviable task, Siva, that the finance minister has this time. She has to stick to the fiscal deficit glide path. There are people like you watching that very closely. And you are in a pre-election year. The government has to keep up spending and capex. The consensus seems to be that capex will be significantly lower this year. How do you see that playing out? Is that a concern, or is that something that you would expect?
Yeah, on the other hand, I would think that they have the headroom. This year, taxes have been very buoyant, and there's good reason to expect that taxes can remain buoyant next year. And therefore, this kind of reduces that pressure to cut expenditures, which typically happen towards the end of every financial year. And I think if that buoyancy continues into next year, they have the ability to continue the policy of capex. Because remember, at the end of the day, that the government capex is contributing to growth and then government revenue in comparison to government revenue expenditure. So I think if the government continues on its path of increasing capex in relation to revenue expenditure, that will be welcomed by all of us. And to some extent, that is crowding in of expenditure or of capital expenditure, which is to say that the more the government spends on things like infrastructure and government capex, that tends to bring in private sector capex in similar regions. So I think from a medium-term growth trajectory perspective, definitely the focus on capex is well worth it. I think the issue is, of course, is that what will they need to cut if they need to make a cutting decision? And like I said, because if tax buoyancy is there, they may not need to cut anything else to continue the support for capex.
Okay, so where do you sort of tighten the purse strings? Tax buoyancy is there, but the disinvestment plan hasn't really fired up, and that could be a concern. Just one point of actionable sort of insight, Siva, for people watching this and wondering what to do with their portfolios on the fixed income side ahead of budget and on budget morning, what would be your advice?
Let's first of all hope that there are no special surprises like we saw last year with changes in the tax laws.
Yeah.
Assuming that this is a little bit more of a continuity, hopefully this will be a lot less impactful than we saw last year. And so in that sense, from a personal finance perspective, this shouldn't change the way we behave. Remember, at the end of the day, the volatility that market creates around an event typically lasts for a day, maybe a couple of days at max, irrespective of which asset class you look at. But when you're making a portfolio investment decision, then you're making a decision for the next several years to come. So we should be a little bit wary of making large-scale changes to our portfolio just because of an event which has happened, whether that be the Fed, whether that be the RBI, whether that is the Union fiscal statement. So I think from a personal finance perspective, even if there is significant volatility, I would urge take a day, figure out what impact it has, and then make a call rather than trying to make a call in rushed means. We also have time. I think from here to the end of the financial year, even if there are any new changes to come in next FY, make those changes to the portfolio in a measured way over the next couple of months rather than all at once tomorrow.
Okay, Siva, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for taking the time out and being with us and giving us your thoughts. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, that's the view on the fixed income side and what the bond markets could do. We slip into a break, and on the other side of the break, Vaibhav Sanghavi of Ask Hedge Solutions joins in to talk about what the equity side could expect from the budget. Lots, I must add, but let's hear out him on the other side.
Welcome back. You're watching Budget the Takeoff. This is our special pre-budget setup for you. And now we're joined by Vaibhav Sanghavi of Ask Hedge Solutions, ASK Hedge Solutions. Vaibhav, very good morning. Great to have you on the show and on NDTV Profit. Let's begin with you settling this debate. Is this a non-event or a big event? How much do you think it matters what happens tomorrow and what Finance Minister presents actually for a record 6th time?
Yeah, of course. I think, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. And from a vote on account budget, right? I mean, I think with this government, what we've understood and realized is, as against the earlier dispensation, you can never kind of discard it in the sense that last time around in 2019, we had few important changes which have been made on the vote on account budget as well. So my sense is, or my guess is basically, I think this is going to be important. One, in terms of continuation of the direction of what they have already been doing in the last 5 years, and whether that is going forward likely as well. If that is the case, then there are broader directions where the budget is likely to go in terms of better supply or better emphasis on supply side. At the same time, trying to support the poor and the needy, which is kind of essential, and kind of tries to balance in terms of the overall population, from a nation perspective. So I think it's critical to understand and see the direction where is it heading post tomorrow.
Vaibhav, good morning. Niraj here. So the street is littered with expectations from around 4 or 5 themes that could probably be the key ones. I want to start off by thinking of or asking you to tell us what do you think of the green energy, renewables story out there, and with a budget impetus, could there be more in store for the longer term?
I think we've been, hearing about, flame free and various other measures to kind of increase the, incentives on the overall, green theme. Now, we also have to understand that this is in line with, our very long-term ambition of 2017 by being net zero. At the same time, the COP28 summit, which kind of happened, and the resolutions which were passed on, I think we would have, along with us, the global other countries as well, would have those targets to be kind of completed as well. To try and push, incentivize the industry's consumers, I think huge amount of emphasis is likely to come about, on this space. And we recently saw, the Honorable Prime Minister also talking about rooftops, kind of solar panels as well. So I think a lot of activity, a lot of news, a lot of incentives and push from the government is likely to be happening in this space, where we in which ways are very bullish for the next few decades.
Okay. The other aspect is this whole belief around capex moderation. Now, even if it's 10% and not 30% growth, but that's still a large number, assuming that they do about 9 lakh crores, that they get 10 lakh crores with a 10% growth. Is that a good number for the capex theme to continue performing on the bourses?
Of course, I think it is an absolute number versus a relative number, right? As a percentage of your fiscal, budget, or probably, on an absolute sense where you are kind of, going higher. My sense is basically that on one side, when we are actually looking at good revenue traction in terms of the tax buoyancy, I think the capex theme will continue. One thing we've found from this, government is the consistency in terms of their approach towards the economy, pump priming the economy, or pushing for growth in this economy. I think they are very focused on the supply side, and my sense is basically I don't think that is going away. Of course, tomorrow, and more likely so, post the election when the main budget comes, would probably seal that. Our sense is basically this will continue, both in absolute sense and relative sense, as a percentage of the budget as well.
Yeah. Vaibhav, the conundrum right now is that the big themes, and like you said, consistency has been seen in terms of policy direction. The big themes have all played out. Railways, you've had phenomenal run-up in the key counters. You've seen that in green energy that Niraj talked about. Infra, defense, one of those. So where do the opportunities in your view lie? And, what are the key areas that you'll be watching out for?
See, I think the way, as you rightly mentioned, have played out a little. But I would rather see the other way, where I would think that they probably just started, in the sense that being these opportunities a very long-term opportunity. So for something like a climate green energy, it's not about 1 year or 2 years, right? I think it is about multi-decade kind of opportunity. Similarly, in case of defense, what we are seeing that the policy actions, right from PLIs to Make in India, I think those are structural policies, and those policies, in my view, will take the industry. It's not again about 1 and 2 years, but on a very good progress path over multi-years, or probably a decade or so. So I think we should not be kind of be myopic about this and probably look for extremely short term. Okay, of course, these themes have played a bit, but I think there is a long way to go as well when we want to kind of capture the opportunity. So yes, of course, in the interim, you may see some amount of corrections, but I think we should be stuck to playing this long-term opportunity.
Yeah, in terms of, I get your point about a long-term opportunity, but some of the valuations are truly starting to pinch. So, your view on that, and also something specific on what you expect on budget day. We were looking through data of how markets generally perform on budget day, and most of the action happens post, I suppose, once the fine print is digested. You see on the fence sort of range-bound play on the budget day. Are you expecting to see that once again?
See, I think first to address your question in terms of the valuations, I think, of course, you're right. I think the valuations have re-rated on the higher side. And we will have to see that how the swelling of your order books are translating into better revenue traction and increasing margins. If that is the case, the valuations will remain high. I don't think that is much of a problem, at least in the medium term. Coming to the question in terms of your budget day, of course, during the time of the budget, you will see some amount of volatility coming about. But unless there is, a big surprise either way, my sense is basically the markets will probably end range bound. I don't think there would be, any major excitement, or probably any euphoria, should there not be any kind of surprise in terms of the announcement. Now, surprise in the announcement, of course, will come from the, fine print reading and analysis. So next day is one where you may see larger action coming about.
Vaibhav Sanghavi of ASK Hedge says the fine print is where everything will matter, and you'll see that next day. Now, let's cut across to Prime Minister Modi. Is addressing the media ahead of the budget session.
फैसला लिया था और वो फैसला था नारी शक्ति वंदन अधिनियम, और उसके बाद 26 जनवरी को भी हमने देखा किस प्रकार से देश ने कर्तव्य पथ पर नारी शक्ति के सामर्थ्य को, नारी शक्ति के शौर्य को, नारी शक्ति के संकल्प की शक्ति को अनुभव किया। नारी शक्ति के शौर्य को, नारी शक्ति के संकल्प की शक्ति को अनुभव किया। और आज बजट सत्र का आरंभ हो रहा है, तब राष्ट्रपति द्रौपदी मुर्मू जी का मार्गदर्शन और कल निर्मला सीतारमण जी के द्वारा इंटरिम बजट, एक प्रकार से ये नारी शक्ति के साक्षात्कार का पर्व है। साथियों, मैं आशा करता हूं कि गत 10 वर्ष में जिसको जो रास्ता सूझा, उस प्रकार से संसद में सबने अपना अपना कार्य किया। लेकिन मैं इतना जरूर कहूंगा कि जिनको आदतन हुड़दंग करने का स्वभाव बन गया है, जो आदतन लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों का चीरहरण करते हैं, ऐसे सभी माननीय सांसद आज जब आखिरी सत्र में मिल रहे हैं, तब जरूर आत्मनिरीक्षण करेंगे कि 10 साल में उन्होंने क्यों किया। अपने संसदीय क्षेत्र में भी 100 लोगों को पूछ ले, किसी को याद नहीं होगा, किसी को नाम भी पता नहीं होगा जिन्होंने इतना हुड़दंग हो हल्ला किया होगा। लेकिन विरोध का स्वर तीखा क्यों ना हो, आलोचना तीखी से तीखी क्यों ना हो, लेकिन जिसने सदन में उत्तम विचारों से सदन को लाभान्वित किया होगा, उनको बहुत बड़ा वर्ग आज भी याद करता होगा। आने वाले दिनों में भी जब सदन की चर्चाएं कोई देखेगा तो उनका एक एक शब्द इतिहास की तवारीख बनकर के उजागर होगा। और इसलिए जिन्होंने भले विरोध का किया होगा, लेकिन बुद्धि प्रतिभा का दर्शन कराया होगा, देश के सामान्य मानवी के हितों का कंसर्न दिखाया होगा, हमारे खिलाफ तीखे से तीखी प्रतिक्रिया की होगी, उसके बावजूद भी मैं अवश्य मानता हूं कि देश का एक बहुत बड़ा वर्ग, लोकतंत्र प्रेमी सभी लोग इस व्यवहार की सराहना करते होंगे। लेकिन जिन्होंने सिर्फ और सिर्फ नकारात्मकता, हुड़दंग, शरारतपूर्ण व्यवहार ये जो किया होगा, उनको शायद ही कोई याद करे। लेकिन अब ये बजट सत्र अवसर है, पश्चाताप का भी अवसर है, कुछ अच्छे फुटप्रिंट छोड़ने का भी अवसर है। तो मैं ऐसे सभी माननीय सांसदों से आग्रह करूंगा कि आप इस अवसर को जाने मत दीजिए, उत्तम से उत्तम परफॉर्म कीजिए, देश हित में उत्तम से उत्तम अपने विचारों का लाभ सदन को दें और देश को भी उत्साह और उमंग से